We are live, and this is
Yay.
999, and this is my special guest here, Woo Woo Wonderment, and we're going to be
Woo.
coloring the Six of Cups according to what Woo Woo thinks it should be, and she's going to tell us about her channel and what it
Yeah.
is that she does here on YouTube.
Yeah, sure. So, my channel, I started just over a year ago now. I celebrated the 1 year anniversary back in April. So on the channel, I go live every 2 weeks. So actually the next show is tomorrow. Normally it's on Mondays, but for the month of July, they're on Sundays this month, because of the way holidays were following and such. But I talk about anything and everything I find interesting. So I have had people on. We've talked about energy work. We've talked about crystals. We've talked about, ETs, that kind of stuff. I have a friend that does human design, so she's been on and talked about human design. So yeah, just a little bit of anything and everything. Honestly, I've also done some book reviews and some movie reviews and stuff like that that I felt kind of tied into the woo woo topic. So yeah, I started it with support from a couple of other friends that also have channels here on YouTube. So they were great mentors as far as getting my channel started, and yeah, it's just been going ever since.
So, what is human design? What does that mean?
So it's, how you talk about like these kind of personality tests and stuff like that, whether you're introverted, extroverted, INFJ, EF, whatever, those. So it kind of takes some of that and astrology and
Okay.
looks at when you were born, and based off of that, there's different basically, I don't say personality types because it's a lot more than that. But you basically get a body chart, and there's different your chakras. Kind of it's based off the chakra system. It's not 100% the chakra system, but similar. A lot of the stuff's similar. But you basically, there's either those centers are defined or undefined based on your astrology, and based on that, you'll, I guess, act in different ways dependent with your environment. Um, so I actually have a coloring book my friend did. Do I have it here? I think I do. So this is what human design looks like. So this is this kind of body graph that I was telling, kind of
Yeah.
mentioning. So based on whether these things are defined or undefined will depend on how you interact with the world. So that's where it kind of has the similarities to the personality types, or personality quizzes and such.
Hmm.
But I've been finding it really, really accurate and really, really useful, because it'll be like, oh, why am I a certain way when I talk about something, or why am I a certain way when I'm dealing with something? And then I'll look at my chart and be like, oh, that's why. It's kind
Well,
of one of those things
then,
where it gives you a little bit of validation as to why you're,
yeah.
act a certain
Well,
way.
I wanted to welcome Living Radiance for coming on in, and for everyone else who's lurking in. So in a sense, is it how now when you're describing that, that kind of reminds me of one a friend of mine who's like completely sold on the blood type diet. Is that
Mm.
like similar to that, but in a different sense that you have these different
Yeah, I guess
personality
so.
types?
Yeah. Yeah, it just kind of helps. I guess you could look at it if you wanted to, and how to live your life.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think it just gives more, almost a bit of a, not a purpose, but just a reasoning behind some things, or like how you interact with somebody else. You're like, oh, that's a really interesting relationship. Well, it's because maybe you fill in each other's blanks, or maybe there's areas that maybe clash a little bit more than other areas, things like that. You can kind of look at it that way. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Well, that would be like let's say my one of my mother's sisters who she's passed on now, but
Hmm.
she's kind of masculine, and she married a very effeminate man.
Right.
And so they together they I guess when I was like younger, I was like looking at that, and together they made a complete human
Right.
being that are
Yeah.
completely balanced out from one another, and yeah, and that's kind of what human design is. But but maybe
Exactly, yeah.
it happens on a
Like I had my friend and one of her best friends, they fill in each other's gaps so that when they work together, they're an amazing team because of that reason.
mhm.
Another example is my friend that does the human design. I did the charts for my parents, and she was looking at them and she's like, "Oh, they must have a really interesting relationship dynamic," which is true. But it was interesting. She could just look at their charts and know that based on the interactions.
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Huh, I wonder what mine is. Maybe it would show why,
yeah,
either why I always run away from relationships or why I gave up several years ago, you
yeah.
know?
I can definitely give you the link after the show if people can actually go to her website if they're interested. I have had her on the show talking about human designs. If you go and look at my lives, you'll see her there. Her name is Jennifer. She's also known as My Holistic Self here on YouTube. She's done a bunch of shows with Gerald Sotero Stash. They have a bunch of human design shows they've done. So if you want to check those out
Well,
too, they're
probably
amazing.
the best thing to do, uh, can you pronounce your name again? I have audio processing
Yeah,
disorder,
it's
so I have
okay.
a hard time getting this
It's
sometimes.
it's
Um,
Kaylee.
Kaylee, okay,
Yeah,
Kaylee. So my suggestion would be is that when we get off the
yeah,
live, and then you just go back and you link it right into the
sure.
comments,
Can
and then I
definitely
can
do that.
go in there and I can put it right into the description. And
That
so
sounds good. I can definitely do that.
that's
Not
the
a
way that.
problem.
So for those listening in, these links will be eventually be in the description, but first
Hmm.
they'll be in the comments. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Not yeah, I can definitely link it because yeah, it's been as I say an amazing kind of coming to like a realization helped me kind of figure out how I interact with the world.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So, because now one of the things I've been kind of thinking about a lot, and at least since for a little while, anyways, is
Hmm.
that looking at these kind of things, like you say, the Reiki, and like I
Hmm.
looked at the channel and these other forms of energy healings.
Yes. Yeah.
Welcome Fatima, and welcome
Hi,
Alexa.
Fatima.
And so, like, maybe I was like thinking, well, maybe these things are like super advanced technologies that are either hard programmed into this world, or maybe some of them are hard programmed into the fabric of the universe. And so
Hmm.
that when you go look at the other side of the world, what we call source, or you call
Yeah.
creator, or this, that maybe that is, because who knows how long the universe has been around,
Right.
that maybe one time. But it's always been here, because that's the thing that's so boggling of the mind about, because if we think of the prophet Einstein, and
Right.
energy cannot be created nor destroyed, and so
Yes.
it's there was never a time when nothing existed, but
Hmm.
there may have been a time when there may have been a time when no life existed, and there may have been like many times and many universes that came in and out of existence, and no, there was no life. And then eventually, then
Right.
one time, maybe life randomly developed, and then from there, it maybe life turned into, it became intelligent life, and then it turned into like a uh, uh, a
Yeah.
giant civilization that could be, that harnessed like the power of the stars, and maybe could
Hmm.
change energy, and then next thing you know, this um this civilization uh uh was able to survive the death of a universe and
Right.
transcend that, and then be able to create whole universes. And so maybe that is what we think is what source is. It's just life that that has figured out how to live separate from a universe, and that's kind of a thought that I have. And so, but then
Yeah,
in that we have, when we think of magic, well, maybe magic is just a technology,
yeah.
and
I
you
mean,
know,
but basically, I've always thought of it as like with you talk about magic and science and stuff like that. Magic is just a word used for what we don't understand.
yes,
You know, like so some of what we know as science now, if we look back in the Middle Ages, would have been considered magic. You know,
hmm,
alchemy and all those kinds of things. But where you're talking about like Reiki and stuff like that, for example, for me, like you know, you'd hear about Reiki or Aqualead or any of these other healing modalities that are out there, all have different names, different titles. But in my mind, it's all source energy, if you want to call it that. But it's all like energy from the universe that is brought down, but it just has to do with the frequency in which it comes down. So if you want to look at it as far as like music, you know, one might be more of a bass frequency versus one's a high pitched frequency and what so they all come through in different ways because even doing energy healing, they don't all feel the same. Some are hot,
hmm,
some are cold, some are wavy, some are more buzzy. So again, talking about that kind of frequency bit. So it's all the same energy. It's just coming through
yeah,
in different ways. And then we as humans want things in boxes, so we put a name to it.
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's been very interesting learning all these different modalities too, because every modality gives you a little kind of unlocks one little bit section more. You know, it's almost like an advent calendar. You know, you open the door for day one, and then because I don't know if you've heard it referred to before, but like Reiki, a lot of people will call it a gateway drug, in the sense
Mm,
that they do their Reiki first. It's what kind of brings them in, and then after that, everything kind of opens up and the world explodes in the sense of like having everything at your fingertips and really deep diving into all this the energy work and you know the woo woo and the otherworldly.
yeah.
Um,
Hmm. Interesting.
mhm.
And so, how is it that you discovered all of this? What brought you to this?
Um, so I've always kind of been aware of the spiritual since I was young. Um, you know, I at a young age had, you know, relatives and stuff like that, you know, show up at my bedside after they'd passed on. I grew up Roman, like I grew up in the church. I grew up Roman Catholic. And so that was always, it wasn't anything I ever shied away from. I'd say since I've gotten older, my understanding of it has deepened more, I would say.
Hmm,
Um, in that regard, but I had always had interaction. So like even when I was going to church and stuff like that, I'd be, you know, kneeling there and praying, but then feeling spirit interact. So I'd feel like a touch on my shoulder or on my hand or, you know, different things like that. So but what brought me kind of to my journey as as we know of it now is prior to COVID, I was having a lot of health issues and I kind of exhausted my basically we went to the doctors, I got scopes done and biopsies done and everything. They couldn't find anything wrong. And so I'm like, okay, the only thing I haven't explored yet is the I guess you would call, you know, the spiritual side of things. It was the only area I hadn't really looked at and had kind of been ignoring for a good portion of my life. I up till about age 7 was really open to it, and then I'd say, you know, all through that kind of school period of my life, so elementary, high school, university, there wasn't as much of that exploration that happened. So I had a friend that at the time had their Reiki level 2, and she's like, "Let me give you a session, see if it works," because I was telling her what was happening. And she's like, "Okay, let me see if it'll help." And so it did. It helped to improve the symptoms I was having. And she said, "Oh, you know, maybe I think this is going to work for you, but you need to maybe see somebody that has a bit more tools in their toolkit," is the way she put it,
I
than
see.
she did at the time. And so that's how I came to work with my current mentor. And so I've been working with her now for 3 years. My symptoms aren't 100% gone, but they have improved, greatly. And so that kind of was what spearheaded, and, it's, the story continues, as they say. I've kind of been it's been ever since that I've kind of moved forward with all of this, and more avenues have been opening up. I just got back from a retreat. Actually, that's what my show tomorrow is going to be about. If you guys are subscribing to my channel, and I appreciate if you do subscribe. But the show tomorrow is actually going to be me talking about what happened at the retreat I was on. It was a weekend retreat about 3 weeks ago, and a bunch of stuff happened there that was just very validating to
Mhm.
my path. So yeah, it was really interesting.
Okay. So you, so what? I didn't. I became a Catholic when I was an adult.
Mhm.
I grew up in a very progressive Lutheran church,
Right.
and so where the one of them is that ordains women and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So that, but you look at think of a lot of the things within Catholicism, which doesn't
Mhm.
shy away from the celebration of ancestors
Right.
and having saints intervene, and so it
Mhm.
probably this whole journey, though Catholic theology is not, it is what it is, but
Yes, yeah,
but
we'll
but
put it
but
that way, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
but but then there's this openness that is there, which
Right.
opens a door to where you're at right
Right.
now. And John, welcome. White Cliff, welcome. And so that you're doing, you do this, and because I think that's the same with me, is because I like my icons,
Oh, I love that, those are gorgeous.
and I have these little ones, and I would love, but I haven't been able to find them. I would like
Oh, I
the
love
whole
that
the
too.
whole Stations of the
Yeah.
Cross, because but I have it in another book, but
Mhm.
but it's like there are a lot of places within the tarot where all of those iconic images in one fashion or another
Mhm.
are mirrored in the tarot, especially in the major arcana. If you look at like the Judgment card,
Right.
and there's a or this, you have people popping out of their graves, and you have
Yes. Yeah.
somebody that's coming out of a portal and coming into this world, and you have that, and then but then you think of like, okay, because a few times that I'd used my missile for
Mhm.
divination, and I've landed on a page like where Jesus is being scourged, and then I just went with it and thinking, okay, so maybe you are feeling like you are being whipped, or this
Yes.
world is stripping all these layers off of you, and so that there is a way that you can use that, but it's not necessarily, is it because it's a random thing, but it's the way that your interaction with this individual, that's how it
Yeah.
feels.
Well, and I that's what I found really interesting, like, the basically, I guess 2 years ago now, I basically started my, so I've been taking a year-long class. I'm in my 2nd year now, but it's Celtic Shamanic High Priestess, so it's taking some of the shamanic practices and the Wiccan practices and kind of integrating them together. So I would consider myself, a practicing witch, if you wanna consider the
Yeah.
terminology. But what I've been loving about it, and especially the way that my teacher teaches it, she's considers herself a very eclectic witch in the sense that she'll pull from the Catholic religion as far as saints and angels and archangels and all of that, working with, Jesus as an ascended master. But then also
Mhm.
pulling from, the Greek pantheon or the Norse pantheon or wherever you feel called and kind of um attached to. And it's been really interesting to be able to basically continue kind of having that um, connection to my Catholic faith and my upbringing, in that I'll go to church still, and there's nothing within those beliefs that say I can't go to church, because when, for example, we do like full moon and new moon ceremonies as part of the practice, and during those ceremonies we bless a drink or wine and cake or food.
Hmm.
Well, it's not much different than when they turn, they have turned the
Yeah.
bread and wine into the body of Christ. It's
Hmm.
not much. So it's drawing those parallels and seeing those parallels in the mass, and just being able to still find that connection. As I said, even on a deeper level, having that even deeper understanding of the processes behind it. And being able to work with, as I said, Jesus is an ascended master, Mary, Mother Mary is an ascended master. So yeah, it's just been really interesting integrating my upbringing with the kind of new sides of things, and again, expanding or deepening that, much like the
So,
rest of my life lately. It just has been deepening and my understanding of everything and of the world, honestly.
so an ascended master, that was someone
Yeah.
who that was a literal being, whether they were human
Yeah.
or they were green skin from Andromeda someplace,
Right.
or
Yeah, there's like, I think they say like 100,000, like there's a whole bunch, like there's so many. I mean, like Buddha is considered an ascended master, as I said, Jesus. As you said, there's some extraterrestrials, so like Commander Ashtar is considered an ascended master.
so what about
Um
like Thor,
yeah,
or these other gods that we once called, the gods.
yeah.
What about that?
Um
And
yeah, I again, there you can consider them, I don't know if you would consider, like in some people's belief, them as an ascended master, but I definitely believe in them as, I guess you'd call it like an archetype. Um, so the way I kind of have always viewed religion, in the sense of, like you say, Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, all of that. To me,
Mhm.
it's all that source energy or that omniscient power, just with different names, or they've kind of taken the different aspects of the personality of that energy and given names to it. Because as humans, we like to identify things. We like boxes. I always joke that as humans are cats. We like boxes, like putting
Mhm.
things in boxes and labeling them.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like for example, with the Norse pantheon, where you have, Thor and Freyr and Freya and Odin, it's taking different aspects of that source energy. So, for example, with Thor, the power of, lightning and, destruction and stuff like that, and giving a name to it in order to feel like you have some kind of control over the situation. Um, so yeah, you could definitely, I mean, for some, I don't know if they're on the list of ascended masters, but I would definitely consider them an ascended master, in the sense of, if they have wisdom and you're willing to listen to that wisdom and work with that wisdom, then definitely um
Hmm.
consider them an ascended master.
Yeah. But then, of course, my mind went to this other place. It went to the Matrix,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
in that whole sense of the simulation theory and so forth. And then, well, what if
yeah.
what if they're just programs like the agents?
I mean, yeah.
And they just come across as these different things. They're just these
Hmm.
these hardwired programs. We call them ascended masters, but they're kind of like the oracle in that
Yes.
movie. They're
Yeah.
they're, they're the guides and how to get there, and so they may be there may not be very many of them, but they just however we've been enculturated,
Yes.
that's how they appear. So they appear
Yeah.
as Zeus, or they appear as Apollo, or they appear as Thor, or they appear as Jesus, or they
Hmm.
appear as Buddha, or they appear as these different things, or they appear
Yeah.
as like Coyote, or whatever, however the different peoples on the different continents, how they
Yeah.
saw everything, and that's and
Yeah.
so, like, that they're just, is like a program, and we assigned, and however we are comfortable, that's how they appear to us.
I definitely think that, like, there's a part of that that makes sense. It's kind of the idea of, like, your parents could tell you one thing, but then you hear it from a friend, and then that's when it clicks. Universe tends to know how we need to hear something.
Yeah,
So, if the one way is not working, well, they're gonna send it another way until you get it through your head.
yeah. Well, and then there are like stories within the, I think the Gospels itself about, somebody had died and they'd gone into hell, but
Right,
whether the hell exists, but then they're trying to come back and try to relay this information to their relatives about, well, please
right.
stop doing what you're doing. And then of course in the more, I think in the moral of the parable or whatever the story is that
Yeah,
they weren't listening and they ended up following the same path.
the path, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the interesting things that I found interesting, again, kind of exploring that cross between what I'm doing now and my upbringing, is like looking, for example, as you say, like at the Bible and being like, well, Jesus did laying on of hands. That's no different than me doing my Reiki energy healing. Actually, they talk about with Reiki that there is no religion.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just source energy. So whether you're, Catholic, Muslim, atheist, as long as you believe that the energy is going to work and do you good, you do your body good, and you're accepting of it, it will work for you.
Yeah.
Um, or for example, you talk about like speaking tongues and especially like Pentecostal churches and stuff like that, speaking tongues. Well, um, there's something that we call like light language in kind of the energy woo woo environment. And actually, I'm going to be doing a show on that in August. But it's not the speaking in tongues is not much different than what we consider what we call light language, where you're speaking in a language other than an English or recognizable language, at least here on Earth. Um, so again, it's these very interesting things, or these parallels that you can kind of draw and really look at and say, again, interesting. Some people will be like, the Bible is true story, the Bible is just metaphor, but either way, it gives us this kind of little bit of a roadmap as to the way to live our lives. And that's what
Yeah.
I've been loving about it.
Well, it's kind of like Thomas Jefferson, who was an Enlightenment thinker.
Right.
And Thomas Jefferson went through the Bible with a razor blade and took out
Yeah.
everything that was supernatural. And then you're just
Hmm.
left, well, here's the teachings of Jesus just as it lays out. No birth narratives and no resurrection or
Right.
any of those narratives. And it's just this. And no miracles, no nothing. And then,
Hmm.
okay, well, this is all you really need is this, and there's no religion attached to it. It just
How to
is.
be a
It's
good
just,
person.
yeah, it's just this, and so this is how a good guy. Well,
Yeah.
so be this and not what your church teaches. Stay away from those churches because they're not they're not they're leading you astray in your life.
Right. Yeah.
'Cause whereas that where you because you because everybody's path is different. Because I know
No,
it
I agree.
it
I
it
agree
kind of
completely.
it kind of sometimes I feel like when I come out and say that atheism is a spiritual path, that I feel like if I come and say that with any if I, especially if I say it with any kind of authority,
Right.
it means that I have just undermined their spiritual path by saying
Mhm.
that their
That is a spiritual
disbelief,
path.
their disbelief in any of these systems is a path itself
Right.
for their own spiritual growth as a spirit, and so by saying it's a spiritual path, I deny their own truth that they are living.
Yeah, it's basically a lens to live your life through, I guess, if you wanted to think about it that
Yeah,
way.
yeah. So I've been working away on your
Yeah,
your
no, it's looking great.
journey, and I took the liberty to make the windows purple because it looks like you like the color purple,
Yes.
and you're wearing purple, and so then that's yeah. So that's kind of what I'm doing here,
No, I love it.
and yeah. Now, what color do you want the cups and all that?
Hmm.
Now, I have these metallic colors. Now, I will just bring out
Oh
my
yeah.
metallic colors, and
Yeah,
so
definitely need some shiny in there.
okay, we can be as shiny as possible, or then can I do that other thing? I could do what I can do for yeah, okay. There is another option altogether
Mm-hmm.
that we can do is these are my metallics if you can see
Okay.
them, but we can come out here and um if I lightly brush this stuff on, I have my fluid or acrylics.
Ooh.
The paper is too delicate to actually
Right.
add any paint with water on it, which is because this is a thin papered coloring book. And I have fluorescent colors,
Oh wow.
and I have some primaries. I just have a very few of these, and I have one, and I have a brown as well. But
Right.
but maybe I want to maybe interest you in thinking about
Hmm.
a thin layer of one of these three fluorescent colors to
Mm.
for those cups to stand out amongst the sea of everything else. So that you don't have to do this choice, but we can do this choice if that's something that you might be
Yeah.
interested in.
Hmm.
Why don't we just I'll get you to think about that.
Yeah.
But what we'll do in the meantime, um, we have these. Maybe
The
you want
people. Yeah.
peoples to be the using the fluorescent colors
Yeah,
or
I'm more
colors
leaning
like that.
towards that, the people being the focus.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
have in some of the metallic colors. There is a gold. There's copper. There's bronze. This is a metallic red or pink. This is metallic red. This is another pinky color, which is purple.
Right.
The silver doesn't really show up very well on this on paper. There's a metallic green, and then okay, one's pewter and one's silver.
Yeah.
Like I say, they don't necessarily. I don't. And then there is another golden, like gold color.
Yeah. If you remove the 2 silvers, is there enough to do each one of the cups a different metallic?
One, two, three, four,
Oh,
five, six,
definitely.
seven. Yeah.
Yeah. So, definitely using, I think, the green. Because yeah, I kind of almost want it to be like not every cup's the same color. I wouldn't like if you can do each cup a different color metallic, that would be kind of cool looking, I think.
All right. I will do that. I'll start with the
I'll let you
green.
decide what cup to do what color, but
Yeah. All right. And then so we want to go back to talking about. So now when
well,
you
sorry, go ahead.
so when you encounter, let's say, okay, whatever these ascendant masters are, have you encountered one
Hmm.
of them?
Yeah, well, like through meditation practices and such. For example, you talked about, for example, Thor. One of the major ones that I've been working with is Brigid or Brig, I think is one of the other ways to pronounce her name. She's an Irish goddess, actually Catholic saint as well, Saint Brigid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but during my first year, we were doing, I want to say it was Imulk, was when she appeared for me, but I'm sitting there in meditation and I feel this hand on my shoulder
Mm-hmm.
when we called her in. And I'm like, interesting. And she's kind of just stuck around ever since. So, like, for example, on my altar upstairs, I have a Brigid cross that I keep on my altar for her. I usually will call her in when I'm doing my full moon and new moon ceremonies. I mean, again, working with the archangels as part of regular practice, we call them in as a form of protection when we're doing energy work and such. Just to kind of give that buffer, that bubble, that's of
Mhm.
safety, because you know, you have the whole light and dark, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, and I don't necessarily work with every ascended master, but if they want to come in and talk, I'm open to I'm open to that. And as I said, my teachers, you know, beliefs are very eclectic, and so are my own. You know, I have a picture of Joseph, Mary, and the baby Jesus on my altar, but I also have, you know, Hindu gods and goddesses on my altar. I have fairies on my altar. I have dragons on my altar because, for example, like I have 5 dragons that I work with,
Yeah.
um, in varying capacities. I have a Buddha statue on it. So it's just kind of pulling from or connecting with those things that I specifically identify with and those energies I identify with. And just not limiting myself, because I feel like if you limit yourself, you're kind of limiting your experience.
Yes,
So
and
I'm
so
honestly just trying to remain open.
that would be like, um, because like the biggest well, I've had a lot of issues with Orthodox Christianity, and
Mhm.
one of the issues is I've had is how do you know that inspiration is closed?
Right.
And then, you know, and then you look at, and then of course thinkers have been asking that a lot long, and I haven't been able to find this, but I had a the first time I was able to go through Walden Pond,
Mhm.
you know, that was written in what was it, like 1840s or something like that. And I went through it in an audiobook, and it was but it wasn't fancy like an Audible book, but
Right.
I downloaded it in the MP3 form, so I have
Right.
and I listened to it on an MP3 player, and so I have no idea where it is in that book. But because I mentioned it multiple times, but it was something in there that just absolutely resonated with me. And Thoreau says that every generation needs to write its own scriptures
Right. Yeah.
because these things in the past they may not necessarily apply anymore. And maybe he said
Mhm.
in terms of like, okay, we have
The adaptability, right?
this book of Revelations, which most people think should never have been in the biblical canon,
Mhm.
and to think that it applies to the world. And every time, and if we look at, I mean, with our being able to look back in history and think of the hundreds of times that somebody set a date for the end of the world, and
Yes.
then the world
Yeah.
never ended, and it never ended.
Well, and you can view it kind of like the death card in tarot. Death
Yes,
doesn't mean necessarily death. It just for me means a start of a different cycle or a new cycle or a new beginning. Um, you know, because without death, there's no change.
yes, yes.
Um, so yeah, yeah, I can definitely see that, and that I think that adaptability piece is important. And I liked what you said too about like how do you know when that inspiration is closed or not? Because like, well, you know where you're coloring here, you paint, so do I. I draw, I paint, all of that, and it's that part of we use a lot of the time, especially as artists. I don't know if you find it, but when I paint, sometimes I'm channeling.
Hmm.
Um, so by limiting that inspiration, you're limiting that interaction with
Yeah,
source or
I've
God or whoever you believe
I've had
in.
I've had some weird encounters with painting, especially when I was like trying like edibles and legal weed,
Yeah.
and I haven't done it for years because I had like had some anxiety issues, and then my
Mhm.
doctor said, "Well, would you like to try therapy?" And so
Right.
I went with it. And but the only therapist they had was somebody who specialized in addiction medicine,
Yeah, okay.
and I didn't have. And so I went into with this, and I said I don't have a drug addiction, and which is, you know, or I don't have a problem, and so I just went and quit
Yeah.
everything. and that was like 3 years ago, and I haven't. But this was something before that, and so this was done with like I have a whole selection of files that are
Right.
tagged called art music.
Right.
And it's it's anything from like shoegazer music, or stoner metal
Right.
or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. And then one of those nights, I had a thing, and this stuff was coming into my head, and I was like more painting
Love
this,
that.
but it
Yeah.
was really odd, and I felt extremely odd around the whole thing, and it was almost kind of frightening how odd it was. But
Mm,
I kind of went with it, and of course I did it at night,
yeah.
and and then but I ended up getting into one of them flow states,
Right.
and
Yep. Where
so
the time just goes and you don't
yeah,
even realize it. Yeah.
where it just goes, and now of course I tried to explain it to my therapist of what I was doing. And but then it was like, "Well, well, Bill, I think you should just not be doing that stuff anymore."
Why not?
But, I think minus the weed and all that stuff,
Right. Yeah.
minus that, and then but then, a lot of the things was that with in the past, when, I would try it, I would always end up with a panic attack, and so I had
Okay. Yeah.
inversion
Yeah.
I had an inversion to using substances, especially because, it's supposed to do the opposite, but it didn't do the opposite. It
Right.
made me a panic attack, and like, well, then when it come to, like it was hard to explain to this person why I do not have a problem with these things.
Right.
And why I didn't have a problem with alcohol, because and I said, "Well, here's why I do not have a problem with these, is
Right.
why it's not an issue. It's because alcohol gives me migraine headaches.
Right. Yeah.
Beer
That's
and
never
wine
good. Yeah.
gives me migraine headaches." And so it's a huge trigger, and so if I have a beer, then I'm committing myself to having a migraine headache.
Right. You know the consequences of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the habit, I never. And then it was like this other reason why the habits never developed was is that when I was younger, I had a tobacco addiction.
Okay.
And I was addicted to tobacco, and then when somebody would offer me whatever, "Oh, let's go drinking," or "Let's do this," and I said, "Well,
Yeah.
you know what? I have one addiction. I don't need
Need
another one.
another. Yeah.
I don't need another one." And
Yeah.
then the other reason was is because of a relative who married a drunk, and
Mm,
I
mm.
looked in on that family, and I wanted nothing to
Yeah.
do with that level of drinking alcohol
Yeah.
on a daily basis, or what, because I saw what it did to that family.
Mhm.
And so I had an aversion to overconsumption of alcohol. And if I go with just a little story, it's a little side story. This
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
this was actually was kind of funny. But this is like when I was in my Seattle days, and I had was going to a doctor, and then he said, "Well, and the first time, well, how much alcohol do you drink?" And
Yeah.
I said 3. "How many drinks do you have?" 3. And he said, "Is that like a day?" And I said, "No, that's per year."
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
he just took the
Yeah.
pencil, and he just threw it down. And he says, "God damn it. Why are you wasting my time with 3 effing drinks a year?"
Right.
Maybe that was the energy he gave me. That
Right.
wasn't what he said, but that was the
You
energy
know.
that he
Yeah, you
gave
could
me
read it.
when he said, and he said, "Why are you wasting my effing time with 3 effing drinks a year? You're that's like just saying 0. You don't drink."
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well,
And but yeah,
no, go ahead.
I'm finished with that. So, yeah,
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting to kind of tie into your story is so prior to, as I say, 3 years ago, when I kind of started back on this journey, on the spiritual journey, I was having to take CBD gummies and stuff like that for anxiety, panic attacks. um, because I was having issues where I'd be, like, sitting at work, and out of nowhere, I'd get panic attacks, or like that, like, tenseness in your chest where you feel like you're wanting to hyperventilate, and it, comes out of nowhere. And basically, since starting on this journey, I've come to realize that I'm affected a lot by, for example, the solar flares that we get, the CMEs that we get from the sun. They cause anxiety type symptoms in me.
Mm.
So I actually have an app on my phone that will alert me when those happen, so that if I have those symptoms come on, I know what's causing it. And so basically, since starting the spiritual work and being able to, for example, do Reiki on myself to help myself regulate, I've not had to take any CBD or anything like that to help with the anxiety. I've not taken that in probably 3 years now,
Yeah.
because I have other ways I can now manage it. And speaking of, like, for example, therapy, um, so I go once a month to somebody, but they're an intuitive themselves. They have Reiki along with their psychotherapy stuff that they do. And
So
it's the only thing I found that's worked. I've seen psychologists and stuff like that throughout my life. Never felt like you were always, talking in circles.
yeah,
But
yeah.
she is the first person that I've worked with where I actually feel like I'm making some kind of step forward, because, for example, if we're talking about something and it's getting really hard, really emotional, my brain is wanting to dissociate. We're in that fight and flight kind of zone. She's able to then send Reiki or other energy healing that is then enough to bring down my body's response so that we can talk through it and deal with it.
Hmm. So is this something that your national healthcare system pays for, or do you have to pay cash out of pocket for it?
I pay out of pocket for it because it makes a difference. I find it makes a difference, and so it's just a sacrifice I kind of make elsewhere. Specifically for her anyway, I do have very limited coverage through my work insurance.
Yeah.
Um, but it's maybe only like $300 a year kind of thing, so it's not a lot. Um, but it's something that I find it makes a lot difference in my life, so I'm gonna make, if I don't go out for dinner,
Yeah.
once a month, but I can do this instead for myself, I'm gonna do it.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I could definitely get therapy covered from, living in Canada. We have, kind of, I guess you call it provincial insurance, or, nationwide kind of stuff. So I could probably find therapy that is covered, but it
Well,
wouldn't be
I
as
think
effective as this is.
I think what it is if I remember right, but you live there, but if I remember right from my
Yeah,
studies, is that Canada has a private-public partnership
correct. You got it.
with
Yeah, exactly.
these situations. So it's not necessarily you pay your tax dollars in, it goes, and then it gets redistributed to
Mhm.
these different these private
Right.
entities, and it works for the most part. It probably works
It
better than
does.
what the
Yeah.
United States system does, or um, you know, and yeah. So anyway, that's interesting.
Well, and this psychotherapist I actually met through my current teacher and mentor. So that was great to have, kind of like the networking that happens. So it's kind of the, like, once you know one person, you kind of have that network now at your fingertips.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that it's, as I say, been really great, because I've actually even been able to do almost multimodal. So I have
Mhm.
my mentor who I do my spiritual work with. I have the psychotherapist that I do kind of the mental stuff with, and then I have my family doctor that I do the body health stuff with.
Yeah. Well,
So I'm
Janet
able to
here.
work on it all in all three areas of my life.
So Janet here had said about
Yeah,
solar flares affecting humans. You know,
yeah,
we should know that this is true because of how there is a electromagnetic effect,
it
and if
is.
you are
Yeah,
overloading the system with this electromagnetic, these high these cosmic rays, which are what,
yeah,
alpha particles, I think they are.
yeah, yeah,
They're
yeah.
and you have all of this in here, this high energy that it is going to make an effect on biological systems because it affects
Hmm.
other things, and
Right.
so we just kind of go through our science only it only understands what it studies.
Right, yeah, what it can see and
And
understand,
what
yeah.
it can see and understand, but there's a lot of things that we can't see and understand. So, because I was like watching a show just the other day, actually it was yesterday. I didn't get to go. My mother wasn't feeling well, so we
Mhm.
didn't go to the local town to go to the barbecue and the parade.
Right, yeah, yeah.
We wouldn't have gone to the fireworks anyway, but nevertheless, we didn't do that. So I did some other things, and then there was the fireworks on the TV. But instead of watching all of the same fireworks on the TV that my mother watched, I watched some of these other shows, and one of them was where computer technology is going. So we have like
Right,
not the quantum computers, which we're working on, but then they're talking about this other level of electronics. What they're calling it spin electronics, and so
okay.
we have like our systems as they are, and where you have, let's say, here is your computer processor is over here, and the memory is over here,
Right.
and the circuits are pushing electrons back and forth. Well, with this
Mhm,
next generation of computer chips, the memory and the processor is going to all be in the same unit, and it's going to be based upon these quantum spins of electrons.
okay.
And so it's gonna take your big computer and that we have that would be like this, and
Right,
then
and
and
shrink
drive
it.
it down to a size
Yeah,
like this or even smaller. And so, if you go back to what and then eventually it will be like in science fiction, it'll
mhm,
be programmed right into down to the atomic level. And so that when I had come back and I said these these things programs that exist in the system that are just
mhm,
programmed right into the atomic structure itself, and we have access to it because you maybe we didn't before, but
right.
as you meditate, or as like what was it, I believe it was Jeremiah. I always think it's Isaiah, but I think it was Jeremiah who said that the law was written on your hearts. But maybe we
Mhm,
think of this not law like the Ten Commandments, but at one
right.
time that's what was thought. But maybe this law is the laws of how the universe functions,
Mm,
is written
yeah,
on the hearts of on is written in life itself.
right. No, I think that makes 100% sense.
Yeah. And so as we evolve as physical, spiritual beings, we will be better able to access the technologies that were already here, or maybe they're
Mhm,
just being written as we go along.
yeah. No, I love that.
I am a product of science fiction. Um,
Nothing
people,
wrong with that.
but yeah, because yeah, I go back to that thing of Thoreau and talking about the need to write your own scriptures, and then it kind of just brings me into that, well, maybe we are writing our own scriptures, but
Mhm.
it comes out differently. It comes out, it's like the Star Wars,
Yeah.
it's Star Trek, or it's Isaac Asimov. And because Isaac Asimov's foundation is it's it's a hard to read through it. It's slow moving. It's classic science fiction, but it has a lot of different elements, and I think that they've tried to turn it into. I don't think that they can turn it into TV and
Right.
movies because if you've ever read the Foundation, the all what there's a foundation, and then there's second foundation, and there's foundation's edge, and then I think there's one or two more, and then after
Okay.
he died, they went and tried to make some quills based upon
Yeah.
maybe some notes that he wrote in a journal or something like that. And yeah. And anyways, but one in one of the senses of, but there was a short story that Isaac Asimov wrote, and in it, it was exactly that. And this is where I draw it from, where the civilization, they grew, and then they became a galactic civilization, and
Yeah.
then the universe was dying, and they coalesce the energies together or whatever, and they figure it, and then maybe a sense that at this point in time, all the inhabitants were essentially incorporated into their AI computer technology.
Okay, yeah.
And then, but then they no longer needed bodies anymore. And so
Mm,
maybe to the point where I don't remember it going into a point of where they transcended the
right,
universe, but maybe that is where it went. And so,
right.
you know, yeah. And anyways, that's just that. So here I got
No,
this. I
no,
made
that's
the
looking good.
mistake of painting some of them all the same colors, but then because I was just like busy listening and thinking,
That's
and
all
then
good.
this kind of I was like, oh no, I painted them all. I drew, I colored them all the same
No
color, but
worries.
I went kind of back in and layered some other colors
No, no,
in.
it's looking nice.
Okay, so now what we have is, now I figured that this is like brick, and we want to make it kind of a, maybe a like a lighter yellow
Yes.
color or something
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
so it goes in with the themes and so forth. And so how is it now, how is it that when you feel and feel these entities, how do they communicate with you? What is
So
the mechanism?
it's still a work in progress. Sometimes, or especially lately, a lot of it's been through actual, like, I would say, physical touch, if you want to call it that. So, like, pressure on my shoulder when there's nobody else there. I live alone, so it's nobody else but, you know, that's really the only rationale, honestly. Um, but the other way that I feel it a lot. So you talk about all the different clairs. So, you have clairvoyance, clairaudience, all these other clairs. So for me at the moment anyway, a lot of it comes through as pressure. So for example, I will have, let's say, an archangel or something come in on my right side. So I'll get, changes in temperature. So it could be hot or cold. I can feel like almost like a air pressure change on a certain side of my body, so against my face. I get what I call it Morse code in my ear. So you know how you, like, when you're going up, up into the mountains or up in an airplane and your ears pop.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll get that in my ear, but rapidly. So it'll be like pop, 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 pop in my ear.
Hmm.
So that rapid pressure change. Um, so I don't know if it's a case of I'm needing to work with them to kind of modulate it to a point where I can understand it as English language. Um, I don't know, but that's kind of where it is at this point. I am slowly starting to kind of learn to listen with here versus up here. So to try and not overthink things and just kind of feel into things. Actually, that happened a fair amount on this retreat I was on, which was kind of good acknowledgement for me being like, okay, this is actually how it's supposed to work, not the way it's been working in the past little bit where I get it to in my head. So more kind of viewing through, not letting the human, or I think they call it monkey mind, not letting the monkey mind have the control. um, and just kind of going with those first ideas or those first thoughts that pop in your head, and not trying to overthink them either. Um,
So
so, like, for example, if you were doing a reading for somebody and you see a boat or whatever, because a lot of the time, like, communication isn't going to be words. Like, sometimes it is words in your head, but sometimes it'll be images or things like that that'll pop in. So let's say you get a boat. Well, it could just mean a boat, but then your mind as a human says, okay, is it a cruise ship? Are they going fishing? Like you start trying to build a story that you don't necessarily need. It's not for you to build. It's the message you're supposed to pass on to the person.
So would this be
Um,
like a literal boat, or would it be like in dream
exactly.
language, or would it be a metaphorical one? So like I had a dream, it was about house and cleaning. And then my mother was in it, but it was a much younger version of her. And then
Right.
there was another woman that was in it, and I'm thinking, well, these must be all parts of my own self that I need to
Yeah.
read these dreams like I'm reading a tarot card, because it's rather than like this is a literal thing.
Right. A lot of the
With
time
it,
it is metaphorical for sure.
because that's where I would be looking at, like, let's say the book of Revelations, which I really never spent much time studying it, because I dismissed it out of hand when
Hmm.
well, not when I was little, because I was scared to death by it.
Yeah.
But there was some point in time in my life, maybe as a teenager or something, that I just dismissed it. It was like, this does not apply to us.
Right.
This is not for us. And as I got into my 20s, and I was in college, and I was studying Bible in college, and then I was thinking, then I kind of saw it was, oh, well, maybe this book, if it ever had any application to real world,
Hmm.
it was that world back then. And then
Right.
if you look into history and think, oh, well, in 88, there, because I was in Israel in
Right.
95, and going into Masada and seeing Masada being destroyed. Masada was the last output of that nation of
Right.
Israel 2,000 years ago, and then in year 88 it was completely destroyed by Rome. It took like 2 or
Hmm.
3 years. And so maybe that book was simply about the destruction of that
Yeah.
land, and it applies only to there, and it does not apply to anything else, because that book was written about those people, and those
At
people,
that
and we're
time.
not those
Yeah.
people. And there were other people around there that they had their own stories, and then Rome had its own stories, and then and every place has had its own
Well,
stories, and they were enculturated in their own stories,
and what
and
was
those
it with
stories.
in 2012? You talk about like the Mayan calendar, and they were saying like, oh, it's going to be the end of the world in 2012 because that's when the calendar ended.
Yes, yes.
But the way their calendar works is it just starts all over again. So again, it's that kind of linking back to that death card again of it's just a new cycle. It's not
I mean,
necessarily the death of everything and that you ever know.
well,
It's
well,
just
and then also, like, well, I know, I a lot of people are getting, they're getting these apocalyptic
yeah,
spiritual downloads, or whatever they're calling them right now, and they're applying it to our society. But the thing is, I think that, but if you studied history, then you would have known that every generation thinks that stuff.
right. Yeah.
Every generation that has comes
Well,
along has apocalyptic thoughts and dreams and visions, and so every generation believes it's going to hell.
and
And
one of the things you have to think about too, which is coming up a lot lately, and again, it depends on your belief system, I guess. But sometimes these people can be tapping into parallel lifeline, like parallel lives. So, it's the whole like you turn left or you turn right. Well, there's a version of you that turned left and there's a version of you that turned right. Well, maybe in that version where you turn right, the world does end, but the version where you turned left and that's the version you're in, that doesn't happen.
yeah,
So there is that kind of blurring of lines that can happen and is happening, again depending on what you believe, but that kind of where that's what could be what people are feeling into, and it's kind of like with tarot and everything else too, where we say a reading, it's only in that moment in time. As soon as you get up from that
mhm,
tarot reading and make a decision, that whole possible future could change.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You can look at it that way, that it's just about the energy in the moment. But then what they're saying, if we go back to the foundation, Isaac Asimov, and the second
Uh-huh.
foundation had this psycho something, and where they were able to look at these big giant systems, and these were
Right.
big giant systems, and then to be able to make predictions as to what is going to happen in the future.
Mhm.
But on a granular level, on an individual level, they couldn't do any of that at all.
Right.
And then where these psycho whatever historians, I think they were called, where
Yeah.
they evolved into a telepathic people,
Mm.
and where they were able to make influences on individuals in
Okay.
order to shape the civilization to go in this particular version way.
Interesting.
But that's that novel. It's a great novel. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a great story. And but if you can't handle slow moving narratives, then you
Yeah.
won't be able to handle this.
Yeah.
And much of the story is done in a narrative description manner. And but if you can get it in the audio form, like an unabridged
Okay.
audio form, that would be a way to go through. And if you even the abridged audio is just as good, because I've done it that way too.
Yeah,
And then,
I'll definitely look into it. It
yeah.
does sound interesting.
Yeah. But anyways, it's that you have that's kind of what I think is what they're thinking in terms of it as, is that there are these, if you are reading the American superconsciousness, or you are reading the Canadian
Yeah.
superconsciousness, or the African, there are these different
Yeah.
superconsciousnesses that are interacting together, and these are the energies of, this is what this energy is saying is going to happen. but
Right.
but then I kind of wonder, I go back into this place, well, what if all you're seeing is dreams?
Yeah.
What if these systems are actually just dreaming, and they're
Well,
dreaming these things, and they're all just metaphoric, that we maybe, yeah, maybe there is a change that's going to happen. Our world is changing because we've passed from I think the age of Pisces and into the age of
going into
Aquarius.
Aquarius.
We're
Yeah.
into a different part of the procession, and because
Yeah.
what we process around, we as we are going, this planet is spinning
Yeah.
around, and it processions like this and and it goes in, I think it's what, 36,000 years.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's something like that, and it's like in 2,000-year blocks. Each zodiac age is in a 2,000-year block. And so and so at the time of Jesus, they were processing from one of those zodiac cycles into another, and now we are
Mhm.
processing into another one. And and so the theory being, hello tapestry of the unseen, the theory is that there is this great change is happening
Sure.
around these events. And
Well,
so the world itself has these major
right.
changes, but maybe it's that we've tracked at the Western world. But
Well, to speak what
maybe the other worlds don't have any changes. Maybe the South American world, or the Asian world, maybe they don't have any changes. Maybe it just pertains to
yeah.
our world as we progressed from Arabia into Rome, to the Roman, to the Greek, the Roman, the
Yeah.
Byzantium empires, into the Holy Roman Empire, as the popular is that technology, that line of reasoning, that is the only world that is
Right.
affected by that. And the
Well,
African world, and they're not, and they're on their own path in their own thing. And so we think that we're going on in this place, and we have different there are multiple worlds that are superimposed upon the whole
right.
thing, and everyone has, each these things
Yeah.
have their own destiny. And I guess that's what just came into my mind just right
No,
now.
no, and and it makes so to what I think it was Hideaway that mentioned it, like, they said, "I understand that we are all connected through our vibrational energy, so what are if we are receiving what somebody else is experiencing." And there has been times where you're like, "Oh my god, why am I feeling this anxiety? It's, 3 AM in the morning." Well, then you wake up and on the news, there's been a major earthquake on the other side of the world. There is that what we talk about as collective consciousness. So
Yes.
even though you're in, let's say, North America, you could be feeling something that's happening in Asia because there's a connection there. But saying that kind of what to what you were saying is our because of technology, we're very tapped into everything that's happening everywhere.
Yes.
But if you look back even 100, 100 years, 200 years, we really were only supposed to kind of know and focus on what was in our immediate world. That was the only world we knew
And that's right.
was,
And that is the
our
world.
town or at most,
Yeah.
our province or our state,
Mhm.
So yeah, as far as you saying like, this person's getting this message, but then this person here's over here is getting this message. Well, maybe it's only for that specific area. It's
Yes.
not the entire planet, it's that specific little area.
And that's right. And that is the world that the Bible was written in. It was written in
Right.
the localized areas, and that's where Thoreau would come in and say, and because he had a different vision, and he says, well, that doesn't apply to me.
Right.
We're in a different civilization going on. There's this different thing going on. It's all different.
Mhm.
And the Enlightenment thinking and the printing press and how the printing press just opened up a whole new world for everyone. And
Right.
then so
Yeah.
then if you look at, let's say, the prophecy of
Yes.
Star Trek, we're going to talk about the prophecy of Star Trek, and you have the movement towards a global civilization.
Right.
And maybe what we're doing, right, if we survive climate change, maybe we'll be moving into a global civilization.
Yeah.
And then from there, and then the prophecy of science fiction says that we expand out into the solar system. But
Well,
maybe, yeah, sorry.
oh,
Um,
no, no. Like a lot of the talk right now, depending on what kind of circles you tread in, is like, for example, you talk about disclosure and stuff like that with ETs or, extraterrestrials, aliens, whatever you want to call them. Um, but or galactics.
mhm.
But one of the big arguments right now is if we can't even accept somebody with a different skin color, how are you going to accept somebody who's a completely different species?
Yes. And
Um,
the way that
so
we
something to
accept
think about.
a outworldly species is that and it'll probably, if I were to make a prediction here, it'll be through, um, okay, so we are currently having a huge backlash against an awakening people. And so
Right.
you have the old systems that are trying to put everything back in the bottle. They're trying to put
Yep.
toothpaste back in the tube. We just got to do this. And so if we just stop higher education, if we stop people from thinking, and we stop people, and we stop this kind of thinking, and we stop this, and then we just feed everybody just this story, we can stop the awakening from happening. We
Right.
can stop the coming of Christ consciousness or whatever it is into the
Yep.
world. We can stop it. And we can just keep on going on and be warring amongst one another. And
Mhm.
but we have this other thing that's going on. We have the computer technologies that and the internet that is just uniting everyone together. And then
Right.
you have this crazy South African who's what he's launching these rockets up into space, and then he's
Mhm.
putting this a global internet thing
Right.
together, which maybe he's not. And then this is all leading to, you could be anywhere on this planet,
Right.
and you can connect to anywhere. And so if you look at how many users of YouTube are there, there's like
Right.
what like 1.6 billion users,
Yeah.
1.6 billion users of YouTube right now. And 60% of those people who use YouTube connect up to it on their mobile phones.
Right.
you know, and a lot of people connect up to the internet via Starlink, because
Mhm.
Starlink is now
It's
everywhere because
reliable. Yeah.
it's there. So you could probably look at, okay, the guy may be crazy, but he's he has good ideas, and you can't completely dismiss somebody out of hand because whatever you fall to the sins of humanity, and because if any one of us amassed that amount of wealth, we would be just as crazy as they are, and because of I don't mean
Mhm.
to,
I
to
know.
go that way, but I wasn't
So
trying to.
I have a
I'm not.
perfect no, but I have a perfect example. So proof in point. So I follow one of the people I follow on YouTube here is Terry at Holding Your Space. And so every morning during the week, she does a morning meditation in the mornings. And there's up
Mhm.
to, I think there's close to 50 people that tune in every morning. And we're from all over the world.
Yeah.
Um, so we wouldn't have that connection otherwise. We're always checking in on each other. How are you doing? Oh, you were sick last time I talked. Are you feeling better? Do you need us to send, more healing or more prayers or whatever? So there's that group of people that I kind of met through her. Well, come to this retreat. I flew down to the States to attend this retreat. I met three of those people in person
Hmm.
that I would have never had the opportunity to meet
Yeah. Yeah.
otherwise. But to have those connections, I would have never forged in the first place.
Yeah.
Were it not for, as you say, internet, YouTube, the
Hmm.
connections, the community that we make. Because, I mean, it's been great too, as far as like talking about like anxiety and stuff like that. You'll be having these symptoms. You're like, oh my God, I've had an upset stomach. I have a headache. I have pain in my back, blah, blah, blah. And you'll be saying that in chat. And then you'll get, 10 other people saying, oh my gosh, me too. So then you're like, okay, maybe it's not just me. Maybe it's something in the energy or something else going on where you don't feel so alone in it. And it
Hmm.
really helps kind of, again, navigate the world.
Now, what color do you want these people's
Yeah.
skin? Now, I have gone this route on a few occasions in this
Hmm.
book, and gave them gave the people's like different colored skins. Like here, my
Yeah.
fool, I did silver, and there's one of them I did them as blue, like they're your blue Hindu
Yeah. Yeah.
god or
Yeah.
something like that, and that's kind of a as like a possibility. And would that be something that
Yeah. Go for it.
okay, I will do blue while we're thinking about that. So
Well,
yeah,
and
and
where you were talking about the paint, I'm thinking for um I guess we'll say the one on the left side. I was thinking of maybe that one we could do the yellow, and then I guess what I would consider the little girl, maybe doing her the kind of pink paint, at
painted
least
pink.
for
Yeah.
the kind of cloak or jacket that they have on.
Okay. All right. So then they have now these are leggings here.
Yeah,
Now he's got his hands exposed.
yeah,
She
yeah.
has
That's good.
mittens on. And there's a little guy running around here. So what color about their leggings are you thinking about?
So if we're doing him with because I want to stay away from the orange just because the buildings are orange.
Yeah.
So if we're doing kind of a yellow overcoat,
A bright
hmm,
yellow, but I have some bright yellow over
yeah,
here.
that's true. Hmm.
Well, you know what? I have this is primary yellow, and I believe I can do
Well,
this.
if you did his hat that kind of yellow color, maybe make his leggings the same yellow, and then we could do the jacket a different color.
Okay. All right. Okay, I can go into this yellow and change it too. So yeah. But this has been really a fascinating conversation, I'll have to say.
Well,
And
as I cover everything and anything on my channel, so the
yeah,
conversation's
yeah,
kind of gone the same route.
yeah.
Um, I know
Yeah.
we had talked that I did bring, people have probably seen it before if they tuned into Ramon's show, but I did bring my deck that I
Yeah,
created
why don't you go
where we
show
were
that right now while I'm doing this?
where we were talking about art. So this is a Lenormand deck. So it's based on dog breeds. So I actually initially made it for a friend of mine.
Mhm.
Um, it's been had a couple of iterations. So I was showing you before the show, for example, like my initial iteration, which is this one. So I hand drew and colored all of the pictures and then scanned them and printed them and then glued them to actually dollar store like miniature playing cards. Um, but I have now gotten it professionally printed. You can order it through my website if you're interested. But it is based on dog breeds. So, for example, like you can see, so these were all done with just like color pencil. Um, and then I also designed the back. I tried to do it so that it was, is it, I think a palindrome, is that the right word? Where you can, the word's the same upside down as
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
right side up. So they were reversible in a sense. Um, but yeah, so this is a little bit of my artwork. I do draw, I paint as well. We had that conversation as well behind the scenes.
Yes.
Um, like right now I'm working on a light language painting. So kind of channeling in different written or drawn light
Oh,
language.
Tapestry of the Unseen wants to see your cards. If you can go through all
Oh
of the
yeah,
cards,
sure.
he wants to
Yeah,
see
yeah,
wants you
yeah.
to do a flip through. And just put it up a little bit closer so it
Yeah,
fills
sure.
the screen a little bit better.
So yeah, so this is the box version. There's a couple different versions. There's like a basic version that doesn't have the box that's a bit cheaper. There's I think a mini version as well. That would be more like this size. So you can see like this was my original deck that I handmade, but these cards are, more tarot, full tarot size. So this is Lenormand, so it's not suits, it's the different symbols. So like this is child, so it's a little corgi, bouquet, which is the Bernese Mountain Dog, book, so is a papillon. I tried to suit the breed to the meaning of the card. So this deck also does have 3 bonus cards that I created that aren't in a typical Lenormand. So this is one of them, which is bed and is a dachshund. You have man. So man and woman is the same card, but I colored in the different picture frames depending on which card it is. Scythe, which is the Dalmatian. So his tail, I tried to make kind of that scythe shape. Collie for star. Great Dane for the stork. So you can see like some of these, the picture kind of got cut off, but it's because I'm adapting the original drawings to the dimensions of the cards. You got the sun. So this card is one of the cards. So there's a couple of cards in the deck that are based off of friends' dogs that I was working with at the time that I made the deck.
Mm.
So this is one of them. This is my friend's dog Lux, who is a border collie, and so I did her for the sun. You have a cross, which is a pug. Great Pyrenees for tree. This is another one of the bonus cards. So I did incense. So I wanted to have a dog doing the downward dog yoga pose in the
Yeah.
deck because it's I thought it would be funny. So I did incense in the sense of like it could stand for,
So
ritual
that's pretty
practice
cool.
or clearing or whatever meaning you wanted to put to it. Keys, bear. This one's the ship, tower. And so these are on linen, for those curious. Clover, fox, moon, mouse, chihuahua, Sahouse. This is a
Oh,
Labrador Retriever.
can you go back to the Chihuahua one, please?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Oh, what a cute little dog.
So I
We
did
have,
mouse. So I tried to put a little like mouse toy in the bottom there.
yeah, yeah. I wish my little Peewee dog would like to play, but sometimes I think she is playing when I'm thinking of like play chase or something like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
but I just never know because maybe she's just running away from me or we play. But then she would go and look back at me and thinking, "Oh, are you looking back at me because we are playing a game here?" And you're,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, and to Janet and Tapestry, yes. If you go to the Woo Woo Wonderment channel, if you go to the channel description, there should be a link there directly to the my playing make playing cards or whatever is the website. There should be a direct link there to like the store page where you can order the deck if you're interested.
Well, that's cool.
So this one is Letter. So, Labrador Retriever, always like helping bring in the mail. Jack Russell. Uh, there's a Lily, so Cocker Spaniel. Of course, in the deck, there's a dog. So I'm like, what dog do I choose for dog? And I chose the St. Bernard.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so this one's a bit of a funny one. I wasn't sure initially when I picked the image, but for bird, so it's a duck tolling retriever, but there's a dead duck in its mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it matched fairly well to the card. Spirit, snake. So I know a lot of people have aversions to snakes and stuff like that. So I put the snake as like a path going up the side of the hill. But I chose a beagle, for example, for the snake because once they catch a scent, they're very hard to kind of pull away from the scent.
Yeah.
So I thought I really kind of tapped into that idea of the snake card. Greyhound for rider. Crossroads. So this is another friend's dog here. So a little French bulldog. Anchor. So being Canadian, of course, I had to put a Newfoundland dog for Anchor
Oh.
or Newfoundlander. Mountain is bulldog. There's that woman card, so you can see it's the same as the male or the man card, but just the different picture frame is now colored in. Fish, which is a Portuguese water dog. Nikita for heart. Clouds is a basset hound. Coffins, this is one of the easy ones that I chose. This is a pharaoh hound, so I kind of went the Egyptian route for coffin in this case instead of your quintessential kind of standard coffin idea.
Yeah.
Maltese, which is ring, and then tying in the Canadian bit again for the whip or rod is I chose the German Shepherd, but there's a Canadian flag in the background. So, but yeah, that's the deck. It
Oh,
was a
that's
kind of a
cool.
labor of love at the time. I worked at a pet store at the time, and my coworker and I, we tended to work on weekends together, and it would be slow. There's certain parts of the day where it would be slow, and so she'd bring her tarot deck with her, and she started doing, Celtic cross readings when it was slow, which kind of got
Mm-hmm.
me curious and interested in the tarot again. And so, I'm like, oh, I want to make her a deck inspired by dogs. And so, of course, I looked initially at the tarot, and I'm like, oh, there's all these suits, and this is going to get long and involved. But then while doing that research, I came across Lenormand, where it's individual kind of symbols, I guess. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I can adapt this a little bit better to individual breeds or individual animals. So that was why I ended up doing Lenormand, even though at the time I knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
That's the route I kind of went with it because it was just easier to adapt at the time with my limited knowledge.
All
But yeah.
right. Well, that's cool. Yes, you make your own tools, and are they really accurate too? And
I don't tend to use them a lot just because I am more comfortable with the oracle cards. I have
yeah.
used them in readings. I use them a lot. I've tried to describe to people like how I use them, but it's a more of a almost like reading hieroglyphs in the sense of you would look at the images and you kind of build a story. So they are a lot like Oracle in the sense of I don't have to try and think of like, okay, what does that card mean again? You can kind of look at it as um
Well, okay. Why don't
more of
maybe could you try a sample reading here for me? I'll just feed you the
yeah,
question. I've been
yeah, sure.
but on my new channel, Tools of Fortune, where it's just nothing but divination. I've been
Yeah.
opening I've been opening the session up with what is the what is the energy of America right now?
Okay.
And so maybe what is it right now? What is it right now? And so maybe
Yeah.
it might be interesting to see what a Canadian thinks, what a Canadian comes up with,
What a Canadian deck thinks? Yeah. Let me
Yeah,
just figure out where did I put the cover card? Because there it is. I gotta pull that out. There we go. Okay, guys, like one card. I
one
love when they
card.
do that. They're like, here's 20 cards. I'm like, no, we're doing one.
Mhm.
One at a time, guys. This is where the bigger deck might do better than the smaller deck. Give me a second here. I was gonna try and use the original deck, but I think I'm just gonna go for the bigger cards.
Okay.
They're being more cooperative. Okay. I mean, and maybe that shows you the energy's chaotic right now, where the deck's going all over the place.
Yeah, well, it's really talkative, and so yeah,
Okay, so there's okay. Well, the same card popped out there as the other deck, so that's interesting.
yeah.
So we're gonna go with that one. I have a couple more, please. Okay, that one. And let's do one more. Okay. So I'll show you the cards I got first, and then we can kind of go into maybe some of the meanings we could derive from it. So the first card I got was the Anchor, and that was the one that actually popped out in the other deck when I was shuffling it as well. But for example, the Anchor showed up upside down. So you could, for example, take that as an anchor could be, if you wanted to say this way, an anchor could be the stability piece. So upside down, there's that instability. But the other meaning, if it was upright, for example, you could say, well, everything's pulling down. There's that weight, that heaviness. But I'm going to take it because it kind of came in that upside down position. I'm going to say it's that instability piece.
Mhm.
Um, that kind of, you don't have that anchor kind of holding the ship steady. It's kind of gone out to sea a little bit. I got the lily. Um, so I'm gonna have to kind of think back into like what the meaning of the lily is. I don't know if people want to maybe Google it. But I know, for example, at like funerals and stuff like that, you have people that'll have like lilies as one of the flowers. But there's also that femininity piece that lilies can bring in as well. So as far as that instability piece, maybe it's that tapping in. We talk about that tapping back into the divine feminine that's been happening. Um, so there's that. I think that piece, as far as the lily would go. So you have that anchor tied in with the lily. The other card that popped out so we had two pop out at the same time, one of which is coffin. So you talk about death, or in the sense of the pyramids, maybe rebirth. Um, so you would have that coffin bit, and then clouds. So that head in the clouds, daydreaming kind of piece. Or
Mm.
maybe, manifestation, if you want to think about, you look up in the clouds for different symbols. So together you have that anchor, so that instability, but with that divine feminine coming in, you're going to have the death pit, but also the rebirth bit. And then as a result, you're going to have that kind of manifestation, or that, anything is possible kind of mentality of looking and thinking up in the clouds there. So, yeah,
Mhm.
that's an example of
Interesting.
kind of what you could derive from the meaning.
I see.
But it really depends on the combination and the order they come out in, too, right?
Yeah. Well, so I don't read the Lenormand. I
Yeah.
haven't actually gone there yet. So
So, like, for one example I gave a friend yesterday is you could have, like, say, like the child card, the coffin card, and then the bouquet card. So depending on what order those come out in, they can mean different things. So if you have like a child, if you had, you know, child coffin bouquet, it could represent the death of a child, and that the flowers are like condolence, for example. But then if, for example, too, you could have it as be that's your that death if you had death first or coffin first, then child, then the bouquet, it could be that death of the inner child, and then that bouquet is actually, the victory, or that bouquet you get, when you graduate or a big event happens. So it really kind of depends on what order those cards come out in as to how the story reads. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so it allows for a bit more freedom as far as story building goes.
Well,
And
because
there
I
is a lot more kind of meaning behind the cards too. Like as I said, like for example, that lily card, there's that feminine piece, but then you could also
your sound just disappeared. Was it my sound? She froze.
Oh, did I freeze? It's probably my internet. I'm sorry. Am I back?
Um, the you're kind of distant,
I
and
can
there's a
see
bit
you
of an
again.
echo. So, well, let's see. Um, yeah. So it's almost like yeah, you're echoing there. Am I clear on my end?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, my
Well,
something happened with my internet or something. It just glitched or timed out or
yeah,
something.
that's what happened with your yeah. You still
No,
got
I
that
can hear you
echo.
fine.
All right. So where we're at here
Yeah,
is
looks good.
we're pretty much done, and it sounds like your internet is pretty much done too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I was surprised it held out as long as it did. Honestly.
yeah. Well, that's kind of how I moved to plugging my phone right into the Ethernet. And so it's like now, granted, I only have 2 hours of battery life. Audio for me echoes, but you, okay, all right. So that might be me. Okay, let me just see if I pull this out. So I'm echoing.
I mean, it didn't sound like you were echoing anymore when I was talking
This,
there.
I unplugged myself from the. Yeah, I guess my internet is done. So I guess this is the stopping point for today.
Sure.
And
As you said, we're
so
almost done the coloring there anyway, but
yeah, and we were pretty much are done. And
yeah.
so, anyway, I wanted to thank you all
Yeah, it was a great
for
chat.
coming here today and for having such a wonderful. We're just not done with the sky, but then the sky actually looks good like that too,
It does actually, yeah.
because it just kind of stands out from everything. And I apologize that the internet is sort of not phone, not whatever. It's not.
There. I like what Hideaway said.
Yeah. AI is shutting us down for the forbidden question was asked. Mike not like. Yeah. All right. What I'm gonna do is turn my volume down so I can talk, and it doesn't echo back to me. All right. So, anyways, this is what we got. We had a
Perfect.
wonderful conversation here with Woo Woo Wonderment. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And and then sometimes she will, if she wants to, she can come back on at a later time and we can finish this conversation.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be this. We can just have a regular face-to-face conversation
Sure.
and so forth. Thank you, Hobo Hideaway, and I wanted to thank everybody for being
Yeah.
here
Thanks for
today
hanging out.
on a Sunday afternoon, early Saturday afternoon, early evening, the day after a holiday in the United States. And thank everybody for your support, and thank everybody who has gone over to Woo Woo's channel to go
Yes.
support her,
Thank you.
and especially for those who will be going over and buying her deck
Yes.
because you want to support the small artists, and with what it is that they do. And yeah, and so anyways, now there isn't a backstage in the Go Live Together feature, and so when I shut it off,
All good.
that's it, and until the next time. And so, anyways, I hear people in my house being really restless. So the dog wants dinner, and my
All
mama
good.
is because she'll start knocking on the door if I start you know being too long with it with this.
But yeah,
Anyway,
when the show's over, I'll pop back in and post those links to the human design for those that are interested that were at the beginning of the show there. I'll make sure to post that in case you want to check that out.
yes, yeah, post that
Hmm?
yeah, like I said before, in the comment, and then I'll just go in and move all of that stuff into the description,
And my
including
next
the link to
live
your.
show is tomorrow at 2 p.m. So
Alrighty.
hang out.
Well, that is wonderful, and I will be back tomorrow afternoon with Alexis Milner, and we'll be speaking more about caregiving tomorrow afternoon, uh, and then you will be where you will, what you said you'll be at, and I'm just gonna cut this off now before
Sounds good.
the echo
Everybody
drives
have
me
a great
crazy.
night.
All right, bye bye, and
Bye,
thank you
everybody.
everybody for all your nice messages in the chats. Bye.